Welcome to the deep dive. We're here to really dig into important ideas and insights, helping you get genuinely well informed.
That's right.
And today, we're tackling a question really that gets to the core of leadership. It's something every leader faces eventually. When things get tough, what's really driving you? Is it, a deep sense of duty, a commitment to others?
Or is it maybe something a bit more about, well, yourself, your own position?
Exactly. So our deep dive today explores this concept of burden in leadership, but maybe not how you typically think of it.
Right. We're not talking about just a heavy task that you have to slog through.
No, this is more about a deep, others-focused responsibility. And our sources suggest something fascinating, that this kind of burden, maybe even divinely rooted, can actually shield a leader from a destructive personal ambition.
It's a really interesting idea.
We're pulling from a mix of sources today, some ancient stories and a really powerful modern anecdote. And our mission really is to figure out why. Why do some leaders step up with this selfless devotion when challenges hit, while others, who seem to have all the potential in the world, just falter or worse?
What makes the difference? We want to uncover the why behind those very different paths.
We could give you a fresh angle on what makes for truly resilient leadership. Okay, let's dive in.
Let's do it.
So we start with a really personal story from one of our sources. You got to picture this. It's way back, pre-cell phones.
Right. Makes a difference.
Totally. The author, he's an assistant pastor, and he's waiting for his dad, also a pastor, before this apparently very difficult church board meeting, high stakes.
Okay.
And his dad just goes, "OWAL," early that morning, vanishes, no word.
Wow. Okay. Yeah, that's stressful.
You can just imagine, right? The waiting, the not knowing. The author says his irritation pretty quickly turned into real worry. His mind starts racing, thinking the worst. You know how it is.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Especially when a big meeting is looming.
Then, hours later, literally just in time for the meeting, his dad pulls into the parking lot. Cool as a cucumber, apparently. Goes in, handles this contentious meeting with, calm authority.
After disappearing all morning?
Right. So the son, he's got to know. The next morning, he asks him straight up, "Dad, where were you?"
Yeah, I want to know too.
And that's when his dad tells him this story that really shaped the author's understanding of leadership. He talks about being a young guy, a machinist in his 20s.
Okay.
And he's wrestling with this strong feeling that God's calling him into ministry, into being a pastor. But he feels totally, completely unqualified, just not the guy for it.
A common feeling, I think, for many.
Yeah. So one day, he's out checking his fox traps in the woods, and he makes this kind of desperate bargain with God. He prays, "Okay, God, if there's a fox in the trap that's least likely to have one,
Yeah.
then I'll know. I'll know you're really calling me."
Wow. Setting a pretty specific sign.
And incredibly, there was a fox in that exact trap. So he accepted the call right then and there.
That's quite a story. But how does it connect to him disappearing before the board meeting?
Well, that's the core of it. His dad explained that feeling the immense pressure of that difficult meeting coming up, he drove back out to that exact spot in the woods where he'd found the fox all those years ago.
Oh, okay. I see.
He sat there all morning. Not to run away from the meeting, he said, but to get fresh assurance. He basically reminded God, "Look, I told you back then I couldn't do this on my own, and you promised you'd be with me. Well, I still can't do this, and I need you to tell me again. I need that promise fresh, that you will be with me."
And did he feel he got that assurance?
He did. The source says his dad felt God met him there again, reaffirmed that promise, and that's what gave him the calm strength for the meeting.
This story really highlights a fundamental leadership truth, doesn't it? That this deep sense of burden for others, it isn't just something you drum up yourself.
Right.
It often flows from feeling accountable to, well, a higher power, as this story shows. And that connection gives a leader both the capacity and the sense of responsibility.
And that perspective, that reliance is actually freeing. It sounds paradoxical.
It really is, but it's liberating.
Ah.
Especially when the pressure is really on. Because you're not carrying it all alone. You're leaning on that initial call, that promise.
Okay, so that connection is key. What happens then when a leader doesn't have that? When that sense of divine grounding, that responsibility isn't there?
Well, that's where we see the contrast, isn't it?
Yeah.
Without that anchor, that sense of God-given responsibility for others, the burden, it tends to morph. It twists into personal ambition. The focus shifts, the mission, the people you're supposed to be serving, even the original calling. It all can become secondary to just holding on to the position, protecting your own standing.
That distinction, the liberating burden versus that dangerous, self-serving ambition, It sets up this next story perfectly. A real cautionary tale from ancient history. Exactly. Let's talk about Jeroboam. He starts off with so much promise. The text calls him a man of standing, but he came from humble roots, son of a widow.
Right, worked his way up.
Yeah, he rises through the ranks under King Solomon, does such a good job that Solomon puts him in charge of the entire labor force for the northern tribes, the house of Joseph. I mean, that's a huge promotion. Clear potential, recognized ability.
Well, absolutely, a real rising star. And then comes this absolutely extraordinary moment, this divine promise.
The prophecy.
The prophet Ahijah meets Jeroboam out on a road, takes a brand new cloak, tears it into 12 pieces. Dramatic stuff.
Very symbolic.
Totally. He gives Jeroboam 10 pieces and tells him God is going to give him 10 tribes of Israel. And not just that, God promises to build him a dynasty, listen to this, as enduring as the one I built for David.
Wow. As enduring as David's kingdom, that's immense.
Immense potential. But there's a condition, a big if. If he walks in God's ways, does what's right, obeys the commands, the path was laid out.
So incredible promise, but with a clear requirement for faithfulness, what happened next? Potential doesn't always pan out, does it?
No, it doesn't. Well, Solomon gets wind of this prophecy and, unsurprisingly, tries to kill Jeroboam.
Can't have rivals.
Right. So Jeroboam flees, goes into exile in Egypt. He only comes back after Solomon dies.
Oh, okay.
And when he returns, the situation is ripe. Solomon's son Rehoboam takes the throne, and the people come to him with grievances, mainly about the harsh labor Solomon imposed.
The very thing Jeroboam used to oversee, right?
Exactly. He knew the issues intimately, but Rehoboam completely bungles it. He ignores the wise counsel of the elders and listens to his young, arrogant friends. He basically tells the people, my father disciplined you with whips, I'm going to discipline you with scorpions.
Oof. Not great leadership. Our source calls it a competency-based qualifying failure.
Yeah, a spectacular failure. And that failure opens the door wide for Jeroboam. The 10 northern tribes revolt against Rehoboam, and they make Jeroboam their king, just as the prophecy foretold.
So he gets the kingdom. He's in the position God promised him. Now's his chance to fulfill that potential, right? Maybe address those labor issues he knows so well.
You'd think so. That would be the logical, servant-hearted move.
Yeah.
The way to truly build loyalty and fulfill the spirit of God's promise. But here's where the ambition, that dangerous twist we talked about, takes over. Our source points out his very first thoughts aren't about the people's burdens or the mission. They're entirely about his position, how to secure it, how to keep it.
So fear starts driving him, not faith or responsibility.
Precisely. He gets consumed by this fear. What if the people keep going down to Jerusalem to worship at the temple? That's in Rehoboam's territory. What if their hearts turn back to Rehoboam? What if I lose this kingdom I just got?
And that fear leads him to make a truly disastrous choice.
A disastrous, sinful shortcut. Instead of trusting God's promise, he takes matters into his own hands. He sets up 2 golden calves, one way up north in Dan, the other down south in Bethel, conveniently located.
Golden calves. That sounds familiar, not in a good way.
Exactly. And then he tells the people, it's too much hassle for you to go all the way up to Jerusalem. Look, here are your gods, O Israel, the ones who brought you up out of Egypt.
Wow. He's literally echoing the words used during the Exodus incident with the first golden calf.
The exact same phrase. He tries to make it sound like he's concerned for them, making worship easier, but the source is clear. This wasn't about the people's convenience. It was pure political calculation, self-preservation.
And this act, this fearful shortcut, it basically sealed his fate, didn't it?
Completely. It cemented his downfall. Jeroboam becomes, as the source puts it, the poster boy for wickedness in Israel.
A benchmark for bad leadership.
Yeah, leader kings are judged by whether they followed the sins of Jeroboam. Get this, even after God gives him a direct miraculous warning.
What happened?
A prophet comes and condemns the altar Jeroboam set up. Jeroboam points at him, orders him seized, and his hand just withers, instantly paralyzed.
Oh.
Then, amazingly, Jeroboam begs the prophet to pray for him. The prophet does, and his hand is restored.
So, a direct miracle. A rebuke and then mercy. Surely that got his attention.
You would think, but no. The text explicitly says even after this, he did not change his evil ways. He doubled down, appointed priests from all sorts of people, not just Levites. He was locked into his ambition and his dynasty. Destroyed. just as God warned.
Such a stark story. And the comparison with the first golden calf incident is unavoidable, isn't it?
It really is. Our source draws that parallel very strongly, a tale of two golden calves, you might say. Jeroboam uses the exact same idolatrous phrase, Here are your gods, O Israel.
So, same crisis, same idolatry. What made the difference in the leader's response? Let's look at Moses.
Right. When the Israelites made that first golden calf while Moses was up on Mount Sinai, God was furious, ready to wipe them out and start over with Moses. But Moses, his reaction is completely different from Jeroboam's. Moses had already shown this deep burden for his people right from the start. Remember him killing the Egyptian taskmaster?
Yeah, intervening for the oppressed.
He intercedes passionately for Israel. He pleads with God for mercy. He doesn't worry about his own standing. God offered to make him a great nation. Instead, he's worried about God's reputation, God's promises to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob.
And he even says, what was it? Blot me out of your book?
Exactly. If you won't forgive them, then blot me out of the book you have written. He's willing to sacrifice himself for their sake. That's a burden rooted in love and God's own character, not personal gain.
The contrast with Jeroboam couldn't be sharper. Jeroboam sees the same sin, the same potential threat to his position, and instead of interceding, he institutes the sin. He doubles down on it to protect himself.
He manipulates his followers, exploits their spiritual weakness, all to secure his own power. It's pure self-preservation versus Moses' profound burden for others.
This really brings us to a key takeaway, something the source calls the prayer principle. Can you unpack that?
Yeah, it's a powerful statement. If God has called you to lead a ministry, he has also called you to intercede for that ministry.
Intercession. So actively praying for the people you lead.
Right. It's presented as like the primary evidence that you actually carry a true God-given burden for them, not just ambition for the role. Think of the prophet Samuel. He told Israel, "Far be it from me that I should sin against the Lord by failing to pray for you."
Wow. Failing to pray for them is seen as a sin against God. That's significant.
It really reframes the importance of prayer and leadership, doesn't it?
Absolutely. So how does this intercession actually work? How does it protect a leader from going down Jeroboam's path?
Well, the source uses this great analogy. Prayer acts like a string on a kite.
Okay.
It keeps the leader tethered to God's heart, God's perspective, God's purposes for the people they're leading. It constantly pulls their focus away from their own status or fears.
And towards God's view of the situation.
Exactly. It prevents them from drifting into that self-serving ambition. It shifts reliance away from finding those clever, sometimes sinful shortcuts like Jeroboam did, and towards trusting in divine provision and guidance.
So prayer isn't just asking for things, it's actively aligning your heart with God's heart for the people.
Precisely. And there's a paradox here too. As a leader's influence grows, as their responsibility gets bigger,
the need for that prayer actually increases.
Dramatically.
Yeah.
It often reaches a point where one leader simply can't carry that intercessory load alone. They need to mobilize others, build a team, seek prayer cover, as some call it.
Yeah.
Because the need outstrips one person's capacity.
That makes sense. Carrying that kind of burden, praying faithfully, it must be draining. Which leads to another point. Leaders need encouragement, right? They need reassurance.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Especially when you're carrying that heavy, others-focused burden. Everyone hits walls. Everyone feels overwhelmed sometimes. We saw it with the author's dad, right?
Yeah.
He needed to go back and get that fresh assurance from God.
Yeah, he needed that divine affirmation.
And the Bible is full of these moments. Think about Moses crying out, "How can I lead these people?" And God says, "My presence will go with you and I will give you rest." Or Daniel praying, agonizing over his people in exile, and an angel comes with the message, "Daniel, you are highly esteemed." What encouragement.
Yeah.
Even Jesus in the Garden of Gethsemane, troubled, praying, and he's affirmed by the Father's voice from heaven, "I have glorified it and will glorify it again."
So this need for divine affirmation, it's universal for leaders carrying real weight.
It is. These aren't just ancient anecdotes. They show a pattern of how God sustains those he calls.
Let's bring this home then. The source uses the Apostle Paul's experience in Jerusalem as a powerful case study for this. Talk about needing affirmation.
Right. Paul's in Jerusalem. Things go sideways fast. There are riots. False accusations fly. He's nearly torn apart by the Sanhedrin, the Jewish council. He ends up in Roman custody. Talk about a low point.
Definitely. If anyone needed a word from God, it was Paul then.
And he gets it. That night, the scripture says, "The Lord stood near Paul and said, 'Take courage. As you have testified about me in Jerusalem, so you must also testify in Rome.'"
The Lord stood near Paul.
Yeah. And in that one encounter, our source pulls out 4 specific, Powerful affirmations, like a lifeline for any leader feeling beaten down.
Okay, let's break those down. What's the first one?
First, God knows where you are. It says the Lord stood near Paul. Not just, God is everywhere, omnipresent, but a specific felt nearness in that moment of isolation, maybe confusion, imprisonment. God knew exactly where Paul was, physically and emotionally. He wasn't forgotten or lost in the chaos.
That's huge, that sense of not being alone, even when things feel off track. Okay, what's second?
Second, God knows what you need. What were Jesus' first words to Paul? Take courage.
Right. Simple, direct.
God's compassion sees exactly what you need in that specific moment. For Paul, it was courage. For someone else, it might be strength or wisdom or peace. God tailors the encouragement perfectly. He knows the specific deficit you're feeling.
I like that. It's personal. Okay, third affirmation.
Third, God remembers what you have done. Jesus says, as you have testified about me in Jerusalem. Now think about it. Paul's time in Jerusalem looked like a total failure by human standards. Riots, arrest, not exactly successful ministry outcomes.
Didn't seem fruitful at that moment.
But God sees differently. He sees the faithfulness. He sees the effort, the testimony given, regardless of the immediate visible results. He remembers your deeds, your work, your heart, even when it feels unnoticed or unproductive to you or others. He sees the whole loaf, not just the current slice.
That's incredibly encouraging. God values faithfulness over just apparent success.
Okay, and the last one.
And finally, fourth, God controls where you are going. Jesus tells Paul, so you must also testify in Rome. Despite being under arrest, despite facing future shipwrecks, snake bites, all sorts of trials, Paul's ultimate destination and purpose were secure. They were in God's hands.
Wow. So even in the middle of crisis, God is saying, I know where you are, I know what you need, I remember what you've done, and I still hold your future.
Exactly. Your future is safe with him, no matter how chaotic the present feels. And these 4 affirmations, they aren't just for Paul. They're timeless truths for any leader, for you listening. When you feel overwhelmed by the burden, connect your own situation to these promises. Okay, so let's try and pull this all together. We've seen this really stark contrast today. On one side, you have Jeroboam.
Driven by fear and ambition.
Right. Focusing on protecting his position, taking sinful shortcuts, ultimately leading to disaster and becoming the symbol of wickedness.
And on the other side,
You have the model of a leader carrying a true God-given burden for others. Like Moses, interceding passionately, willing to sacrifice himself.
a burden that's sustained by God's presence and promises, as we saw with Paul and the author's father.
And the key practice connecting that burden to God's heart seems to be intercession, that act of prayer for those you lead.
Yeah, that prayer acts like a safety rope, doesn't it? It keeps you tethered to God's purposes and protects you from falling into that sinkhole of pride, fear, and just self-preoccupation that trapped Jeroboam.
A safety rope against ambition. I like that.
So this really leaves us, and you listening, with something to think about, a kind of challenge.
Okay, what's the final thought?
Given everything we've explored, the weight of responsibility, the danger of ambition, the power of intercession and divine affirmation, maybe ask yourself, what burdens has God actually entrusted to you right now in your life, your work, your family, your community? Where is your sphere of influence?
Recognizing those specific responsibilities.
Yeah. And then how can you consciously lean into that burden? How can you cultivate that habit of active prayer, of intercession for the people or the mission connected to that burden?
And seeking that divine affirmation.
Exactly. How can you intentionally look for and lean on God's reassurance that He knows where you are, knows what you need, remembers your faithfulness, and holds your future so that you can persevere? The goal being to ensure that the mission He's given you always eclipses your desire to just protect your position.